Hello, my name is Nisha Sharif, and you're watching Decoding Careers, where I talk to professionals about their careers. Today, we have Zishan Ali, who works as a documentary filmmaker for Meerkat Media. You can watch the movie he directed on PBS named Two Gods, which focuses on two people who apprenticed under a Muslim casket maker and a body washer in Newark, New Jersey. Now, here's some information about being a director or a documentary filmmaker. On average, the salary for a director ranges from about $32,000 to $182,000 annually. And a lot of directors in the industry have a bachelor's degree in theater, filmmaking, or radio and television. But in general, it'll probably take about 4 years of schooling. So how are you doing, Sishampai?
Good. I'm doing very good. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for being here. And I usually just love to start off with this question, which is, why did you decide to become a documentary filmmaker? I love knowing the reason why people decided to follow a career.
Well, I think it actually started with almost like kind of like what you're doing now. I think ever since I was a kid, I loved asking people questions about their lives. I was always a listener. And so I loved being able to hear people tell their experiences. Even when I was a kid, my favorite part of being able to see my friends or my family was hearing about their day and like learning from them and their experiences. So that from a young age, I think I always had that natural skill set to just be somebody who was always wanting to learn about people's experiences in their lives and what they were doing. And then I think as I got older, I became very interested in visual art. And so I was very interested in photography. And so when I was in high school, I took a lot of photography courses and I found a lot of sort of like connection with that. And so I basically went to college and I decided to study filmmaking because I was able to kind of join a lot of my interests, which was photography, interviewing, writing. And I think it took me a little while to find documentary film, but I think I was interested in studying that in college. And then after college is when I started getting more into the documentary film world.
Okay, so I guess like there's a lot of soul searching involved in your story. And whenever I think about like being like a director, you always get like that person who sits in those like special chairs and has like those like squares and they like action. And I really like that. I think it's like super cool. Um, could you tell me what 3 words best describe your profession? Because there, like your profession, I'm sure there's so many aspects of being like a documentary filmmaker. Could you tell me what 3 words best describe your profession?
I think the most important thing for a documentary filmmaker, the first word that comes to mind is patience. And the second is, I would say you have to be observational, like a good observer. And third is you have to be creative. You have to not only just in terms of art, but problem solving. Documentary film is not about actors and creating things. You're just filming things on the go, so you have to be very quick in terms of how you think. So I would say those three, probably patience, observational, and creativity. Creative, I think, are the 3 words.
Definitely. And I've watched my fair share of documentaries, and I always just see like sometimes they will talk about like a problem, like when they're like, I watched this one documentary about these people interviewing like indigenous people in South America. And so they were trying to find out like different kinds of like rituals that the people did, that religious, like ancient religious like organizations did. I wouldn't say they're ancient, but native. And so a lot of people didn't want to talk to them, and so they had to find alternatives. And I really see where problem solving and being creative definitely plays in to being a director or a documentary filmmaker. So we had talked about this earlier, and you had actually touched on it where you were talking about that you had gone to college. Could you describe to me what educational background is best or what is like required for being a documentary filmmaker?
For documentary film, there's actually, a lot of people do study film. So some people study film production, but I think a lot of people also study journalism. So I think if you're interested in documentary film, like studying journalism or writing, I think is also very important because you're learning how to take a story and put it down into one place. So I would say writing, English, creative writing, and journalism also fit in, but a lot of people do study film, radio, television. So I would say those are any backgrounds that I think are good fits for that field, if you're interested in it.
So there's like a wide variety of where you can come from. That's really interesting. So while we're on the topic of education, do you think there are any special certifications or trainings? I know this doesn't really apply, but is there any like that you can take to become better or further your knowledge?
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, like there's a lot of different specific type of filmmaking sort of areas that you can take, certifications in. I took a lot of special certifications in camera work. So in addition to just documentary filmmaking, I specified in different types of camera training. Some people are very interested in editing. So you can take kind of courses and certification on how to edit. So there are skill sets within the world of documentary film that you can polish your skills a little bit more, and it's usually recommended that the further in your career you get, the more regularly you take certifications like that, so you stay more up to date in the field, in the same way that a doctor would study for board exams or something. Like documentary filmmakers are also encouraged to always learn about new technology, new camera, new creative storytelling styles. So that's definitely always recommended.
Yeah, so it is like I feel like a lot of careers are like this. It's like a furthering like when you work as a director, you are furthering your knowledge of like being in the film industry, which is really interesting. Now we're at my favorite question, and this is a question I'm really excited for. And the question is, could you describe to me a typical day in your job? I'm really excited for this just because, like, as a director or like a filmmaker, you like I would say like no 2 days are different. So I'm really excited to hear about this.
Yeah, that's my favorite part of the job, is that no 2 days are different. And it really depends on, usually, so in the process of making a film, you're usually divided into three different parts of the process. There's pre-production, which is the sort of like planning of a film. And so if I'm in the pre-production phase, I'm doing a lot of research. So I'm reading articles, I'm having interviews on the phone or on Zoom with people just to get to know them. I'm sometimes traveling to a location and, learning about a place that I want to do a film in. And so that's really fun because it's all about building relationships and learning. So I always loved that part of school where it was just researching and getting more information and finding something that you're really interested. That's what the pre-production phase is. So say my days are usually filled, like right now, I'm developing a new project. So there's a lot of research, there's a lot of interviews, there's a lot of that sort of work that I'm doing. When I'm filming a documentary, when I've started to go forwards with an idea, a filming day is all over the place. I get to sort of go, I travel a lot. I'm usually bringing a camera with me. I'm following a subject or an event. And, I'm just I'm following the story. So wherever the story takes me, that could be, a far away place. It could be somewhere. I live in New York City. So sometimes I'm filming in New York City and I'm going, out in the field and filming. That's sometimes my favorite part. And then the last part is editing. So sometimes I'm also reviewing footage. I'm in an editing room, which is where like an editor is kind of assembling all of the materials. We're mixing the sound and the audio. We're making music to go into the film. So all of those parts of the process are so different. So in 1 year, no month is the same as another and no day is the same as another. So it's always feeling very different. And I'm working on different projects at the same time. So I like it that it's never boring. My job is always sort of very interesting, very stressful because all of those pieces move very quickly, but it's very interesting because it's never the same.
It seems so, and I feel like with every project, like if I was someone who was making a movie, I would be so intrigued and just really interested. And I love how no 2 days are different for you. And when you actually do think about it, that is something a lot of people want. And it just seems so fun that you're kind of like whenever you work, it's like being a free spirit, I'm sure. Like you can go wherever and do whatever. And I feel like that is really fun. And it seems like there are so many aspects of your job. Could you tell me, like, because of this, what do you think are the three most important skills that are needed for being a documentary filmmaker?
I think you have to be a very dedicated person. So it's not easy, right? So a lot of times you have to be very persistent. So I would say the most is persistence, is you have to be willing to, sometimes it's going to take a long time to get somebody to agree to an interview, to get access to a subject or a location. So sometimes that takes a long time. Sometimes it just, you have to film for a long time. I made the film that I made, I filmed for 5 years. And so you're filming, you have to be very, very persistent and dedicated to that. So I would say persistence and dedication are very, very important skill sets to have. I think it's also very important to be inquisitive as a documentary filmmaker. You have to be a curious person. I think you have to be somebody that always is looking for answers. So I do think that it's hard. It's a hard job if you're not somebody that's curious. Like, I think you should always want to never take anything. If somebody tells you something, you should always want to know more. You should always want to ask more questions. So I think that always helps. And then I think it goes back to a creative sensibility. You should always be a problem solver, and know how to think of a solution very quickly. So I think creativity is always very important.
Okay, so those three things, I guess they are really like they play a very big role in being a filmmaker. So going on the topic of like skill sets and whatever, you talk a lot about how it's like a lot of effort and it's a lot of work and it takes a long time, 5 years to make one movie. And it's a great movie, but 5 years is a really long time. So could you tell me some challenges that come with filming for that long and for being a director filmmaker?
Some of the challenges too as a director is, I think people sometimes forget, is that you're technically the manager of a lot of different people. So a lot of people are coming to you for a lot of information. So as a director, I will be working with an editor, I'll be working with a composer making music, I'll be working with my subjects, I'll be working with producers who are helping with the sort of financing of a film. So the hardest part is about making sure that everyone is on the same page, and you are the person that's in charge of keeping the momentum of a project going. So 5 years is a very long time, and it's also a long time to ask people to commit to one creative project. So you have to keep them motivated, you have to keep the project exciting, you have to always find new opportunities within that project for people. So I think that's one thing that I think I grew the most in was my management skills. I think the directors are essentially like the lead managers of a project, and so it takes a lot of that is a challenging part, is to manage a lot of different communication, a lot of people coming from different places and backgrounds. And so I like that part of the job, but that is definitely a challenge of the profession.
So I'm sure that like it's really hard. As you said, 5 years is a long time. And 5 years for filming, it must affect your personal life. It must affect the way like you are with your family or like how like yeah, I mean it's a really busy job, I'm sure. So how did you balance your personal life with your work life?
It's very difficult. I think some jobs, for example, have a regular schedule, like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and you're working Monday through Friday. The hard part about a documentary filmmaker is you have no set schedule. So sometimes when I'm filming, I have to just follow the subject. So sometimes that means, I'm on the road for a long time. Sometimes it means I have long days, like I'm editing very late if I have a deadline that I have to submit something for. So the hours can be a little all over the place. But the really nice thing about that is there are sometimes periods, like when I'm just doing research, my schedule is much more relaxed. So I'll sometimes have 2 to 3 months of like, a very sort of like breathable schedule. I can kind of make time for my family. I can make time for rest. I think that's really important, to never be too busy, because then you'll get burnt out a little bit. So I think it's important that I like that the job goes in kind of peaks and valleys. Sometimes it's very busy and sometimes it's very sort of like relaxing. But that is the hardest part, is like work-life balance. So I think some people find the profession very difficult because it's hard to always make time for family. I don't think I could I don't think I could make documentary films my whole life, just because, certain points you want to settle down, you want more of a relaxed schedule. But for now, it's been very enjoyable.
As I can tell, you look well, when I was talking, you looked really happy, and I could see in your eyes that about your movie, you just seemed really proud. And that, I guess that makes me happy, and it makes me kind of like lean towards this career because if it feels like, oh wow, there's so many different aspects and there's so many different things about this career that really bring it to life. Now, this is the most important question. So to everyone who is watching this video, please try to focus and know that this is the most important question. And that question is, what advice would you give to a high schooler who's trying to pursue this career?
I would say if you're interested in documentary film, the most important thing is to practice. So I would say, obviously it's important. Education is important. My biggest thing that I wish I did more when I was in high school would be to practice making a film, like practice asking questions, get that skill set before you try to make a film for the first time. Because then when you do that, you'll have the practice of knowing how to do an interview. You'll have the practice of holding a camera if you can. If you can get access to a camera, even nowadays, like on cell phones, like, film a little short video if you can, and try and practice editing that. Learn what you're more interested in, find what your skill sets are, and keep practicing and practicing and practicing. Because I wish I practiced a little bit more when I was at that high school age. I did photography, but I didn't do a lot of video work. I didn't practice interviewing a lot. So it took me a long time to grow into those skills. I wish I had those a little bit earlier. But I would say, do that, watch a lot of films. There's a lot of great access to documentary films. So it's really important to watch and study. The good thing about filmmaking is, you don't have to read a lot of textbooks for it. You can really just watch what other filmmakers are doing and be inspired by that. I would definitely say know what types of movies you like, know what types of stories you like. And that is a very important aspect of it. So I would say it's never too early to start on those things. And then if you're interested in studying it, definitely do research into the types of programs that you like in college. I do think college is a really great place to study and learn from really great filmmakers if you're interested in film. So, I would just say keep practicing, keep researching, and find what your skill sets are early if you can.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, thank you so much. That was some great advice. Everyone, this is Zishan Ali. Go watch his amazing documentary called Two Gods. It's on PBS. Excuse me. It's on PBS, and you can tell that he put so much work in. Jazakallah khair for being here, Zishan Bhai. I really appreciate you agreeing to this interview.
Of course. Thank you for having me.